Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Stompin Tom fan club and the Canadian Music in the 80s and 90s A YouTube channel that I run. I've got a very special guest today, someone I've known of for a long time. CIUT radio host Steve Fruitman. Thank you for joining me, Steve.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. I don't know even know where to start. I guess I want to talk about you a little bit. How did you start doing radio? Like, how did you get on the radio? When did you start doing that?
Funny you should ask because just today I completed my 35th year here at CIUT.
Wow,
So
congratulations. That's awesome.
thank you. I started in 1988 because I didn't like what I was missing from the radio dial. It
Hmm.
was just too much good music that wasn't being played. And, I have a big mouth and everything. And I said to my wife, I should get my own radio show. And she says, yeah, you should. Why don't you do it? So I thought, wow, yeah, maybe I should. So I went and did it.
And what was your involvement with were you involved with the university before you started the radio show in any
No, I
way?
wasn't. No.
They were just looking, you just got asked to get your own show or?
Yeah, I made a proposal
Hmm.
and it was accepted. And the 13th of June, 1988, I got my first program on the air.
Okay. And just to refresh what was it called? It was a different name than what you call it now.
I've had a few different names over the years.
Yeah.
My first show was called Mariposa Radio Folk Waves.
Okay.
And I changed the name at the behest of the station around a year and a half in.
Hmm.
I was looking for a name, and Charlie Angus and the Grievous Angels with Tim Hadley, whom you know and have interviewed,
Hmm.
had a song called "The Great North Wind" on their first cassette, which came out around 1988, called "Tootlegang." So the
Hmm.
song was "The Great North Wind," the first song I just loved that song, and I thought, hey, that would be a great name for a radio show. And I asked Charlie, who we know as Chuck,
Hmm.
if I could use the song as a theme song, and he was, yeah, he was. I'd be very proud if you did that. So I did that show for about 11 years, and that was mostly a Canadian folk show.
Hmm.
And my definition of folk music was a little broader than most of the folkies out there. Like to me, it was someone like Wilf Carter's. I don't
Right.
care what anybody else calls him. To me, it was like Canadian folk hero. And I always considered Stompin Tom Connors to be a folk artist as well, although he'd probably turn in his grave if you heard me say that. But these guys were, there's so much folklore about them. How can they not be folk heroes? So, anyways, like back to your question, I did that for 11 years and found it quite restricting. And I started another show at 1999 called Back to the Sugar Camp.
Right.
The theme song was a fiddle tune by Ward Allen called Back to the Sugar Camp. And I was looking for a name, and I just looked through my fiddle albums, and I that being Allen, he was one of the first ones alphabetically that I used, and I used that name for the next number of years. And in 2013, I decided I'd had enough. Like 25 years of folk music was enough for me. I was really a rock and roller, and had all these great albums and country records and fiddle albums and just all kind of stuff. And I wasn't using very much of it. It was like me, mostly people sending me their latest CD and interview them and
Right.
put it on the radio. So I wanted more freedom to just. So I expanded from a 1 hour show a week to a 2 hour show a week called 33, 45, 78. And that's what I do now.
Right. I listen online because I don't live in Toronto anymore. So I listen.
Wonderful to be able
Uh,
to do that. You can
it
listen
is.
anywhere
It's
in the world these
unbelievable.
days. It's great.
I love your themes. Your theme shows are fantastic. I don't know how you come up with them, but it's great when you come up with a theme and you don't realize how many songs and different kinds of music go along with those themes.
Well, that's really great thing to do because for me anyway, because it forces me to put a playlist together of disparate kinds of music. I mean,
Yeah.
it comes from all over the place. Like just today, my latest show was about green. So if somebody had green in their name, or someone had sung about a green river, or anything, or the green grass of home,
Right.
that would fit the format. And my job then is try to weld it all together, in a comprehensive way, which brings people places.
Right. And you've done that very well. Like I kind of like the way you broadened what you can play on the new version of your show, because you can spread into more. I mean, you still play folk music and you still play, but you can spread into so much different kinds of genres over the years too. Like you can, and you obviously are very passionate about music of all kinds.
Yeah, I never wanted to leave folk music. I didn't want to be boxed in by it. So
Yeah.
I still use folk music, as you say, and I love that stuff as well.
So are you an avid record collector over the years then? Is that what really made you passionate about doing a radio show?
There's my part of my record collection. It just
Part of
goes.
it. That's awesome. So you've been collecting for a long time.
Bought my first record at Eaton's Yorkdale in
Wow, that goes.
1964. It was "She Loves You" by the Beatles, 45.
And you're not originally from Toronto. I've heard you say before you're from Timmins originally, aren't you?
Yeah.
And when did you move to Toronto?
Well, we moved down here when I was a little kid,
Hmm.
and then my mother would take me, my brother and sister up to Timmins every summer,
Hmm.
and then I would go up at Christmas and Easter and any holiday. They send me up to Timmins. You know, my mother had a hard time with three kids all around the same age, and
Right.
so she would send me up to Timmins, maybe in the oldest one, and so I spend so much time there.
So how did you begin your association with Stompin Tom? Like when you first contacted him?
1965, summer,
1965.
summer, yeah.
He was just getting started up there at the time, wouldn't you been?
He was playing at the Maple Leaf Hotel, of course, in Timmins. It's famous for that, and of course, Kate Lepine was the bartender at the time. But
Hmm.
I was a little too young to go into bars. Timmins
Right.
had 42 of them. For a population of 29,000, there was 42 bars. My brother and I used to walk around town counting the bars. And anyways, Tom was doing a 15-minute radio show each day from CKGB radio, which was kitty corner from the Maple Leaf Hotel.
Right.
Like it was a 2-second walk, right? So I I went back up to Timmins in 1965 for the summer, and I brought all my record collection with me. So at that time, that was about 10 or 20 45s and about the same amount of albums: The
Hmm.
Animals, Dave Clark Five, The Beatles. And my friend Terry Koza, who lived on Howard Avenue in Timmins, came over and was listening to my records. And I said, "Have you got any new records?" He said, "Yeah, just one." I said, "One?" He said, "Yeah, yeah, I won it from the radio station here. It's by this guy Tom Connors." It's before he was known as Stompin Tom, because that came in about 1967, right?
Right.
So this was a couple of years earlier. And I said, "Okay, well, why don't you bring it over?" And he brought it over one day and put it on. And the first thing I heard was, get ready for this, twang, twang, a diddle dang.
Yeah.
And I would tell you, like, the Beatles were doing it to me, but this guy did it to me too. And, it was like, woo, my hair was standing on end. I didn't have much of it then, um, mostly crew cuts. And so I said, "Who is this guy? He's a guy who writes songs about Timmins. He's on the radio every day." So I started to listen to his radio show, and my grandmother would just, you know, "What are you listening to? This guy is terrible. He can't sing. He sings about larder from farter and everything like that. And I said, and till her dying day, she would say, "So, Stephen, are you listening to that? Stop it, Tom." So I told Tom about that. He got a good giggle out of it.
I imagine he would. Well, it's just, I guess, because nobody sounded like him. Even back then, I would imagine.
Nobody sounded like that. You know, he had the knack of bashing you over the head with his first line of each song. She's on a bar hopping spree. Come on, you mucking slushers. I mean, he just had you in the palm of his hand
Right from the
immediately.
opening.
Yeah, you had no choice in the matter.
It's like
He
when
had
he opened up the shoe, he used to open up his concerts with Bud the Spud. He wouldn't even
it's
wait.
Bud the Spud. Like it was like I say, it just really aggressive on the first line of a song,
Right.
and it left you powerless to do anything but just dig it.
I mean, I guess that I find that about a lot of Canadian artists in general. I've always found Canadian artists to have their own thing. Like I can whip off about five names of Canadian artists that you know who it is the second they open their mouth. Tom is
Yeah,
one of them. Gordon
yeah,
Lightfoot is one of them. The Tragically Hip, um, Brian Adams, guys like that. Like they just you know who they are the second they open their mouth. And I find
totally. There's
that's
nobody else like that.
yeah.
They're very,
And
very unique artists.
yeah, and Anne Murray, the same thing. You know who it is the second they open their mouth, and
Yeah,
it's a distinct sound that they carry. And I don't find that with a lot of American artists. Um, Maybe British artists are more like that too, but maybe it's kind of the relationship between Canada and Britain too. But I just find Canadian artists have their own thing going with them. They really do stand out among the crowd.
right. So I'll tell you the rest of the
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
1965
Yep.
story. So this friend of mine, Terry Koza, uh, we have to meet this guy. So we hung around the radio station because he was on at 5 o'clock, I think, in the afternoon, something like that.
Hmm.
Just a 15-minute little program he had. We'd sing two or three songs and thank people for his being in his fan club and that kind of thing. And he, of course, announce where he's gigging, you know, always. Because the radio station was one of the biggest reaches in northern Ontario. It went right up to Moosonee, La Sarre, Quebec, Foleyet, Chapleau. It covered a big area, so it was more than just Timmins. So
Right,
Tom used it as a vehicle, of course, because he was always thinking entrepreneurial. How
right,
can I make it? How can I get more fans and stuff like that? So I got to meet him. He had sandy color hair at the time, and he looked like he was half asleep with his guitar, walking over to. He probably was half asleep because he stayed up all night, and this was like the afternoon, and we met him in front of the radio station, and we said, "Are you Tom Connors?" "Yes, boys, that's who I am." And that's about all we said, because he had to go in and do the radio show. So we saw him a couple of times. We always just say hi, and that was really cool for us because we thought he was on a records. He must be a star, right?
right. He how old have you been when you actually got to meet him the first time?
65. I was probably about 12.
12. Have you ever talked to him about that since? Like, did he remember you at all, or?
Oh, not from that. No, he wouldn't remember me from that. I sort of got more of a relationship with him after I started doing the Great North Wind and Mariposa Folkwave shows, because I wanted to get him on the show.
Hmm.
And over the subsequently, I had him on several times over the last years of his life, actually.
Right,
But that's sort of when I had a relationship with him, friendship with him. Um, Before that, it was just being a fan.
right. Now, the first time I heard you talk to him was, I remember reading an article in the paper that he was basically the first time anyone heard from him in a while. I guess he was just in the middle of kind of coming out of retirement. And you did an interview with him, not about himself, but about Steven or Steve.
That's correct. Yeah. Um, that was a really a big coup for me because it got written up in the Toronto Sun, and I don't know if
Hmm.
you know about Toronto radio, but CIUT never gets written up in the media.
Right.
So that was a real bonus.
Yeah,
A
I was,
coup.
and you've interviewed him several times since then.
Yeah, including the
Um,
very last interview that he ever did. Yeah.
yeah, I was just going to say that you interviewed him the last time he'd ever done a radio interview.
He was
Um,
really sick and hurting at the time, and he put on a professional face and did the interview.
I could tell by the way he was talking, he didn't sound himself. Like he
Well,
sounded,
Tom was always eager to do interviews with me. In fact, he once phoned me up and asked me to do an interview when they were in Toronto. The band was playing on their tour with Tim Hadley in the band in Toronto, and they stayed in these cheap motels on the Lakeshore Strip
right.
where nobody would figure that he was there that way. And they were listening to my show, and Tom told Hadley, call him up. I want to talk on the show. So I get this call. Tom wants to talk to you. Sure. Okay, let's go. You know,
Um, but he was a fan of your show too, wasn't he?
whenever I was at their place, Lena, his wife, would show me the radio. This is where we listen to you, Steve. And he would listen just about every week. Yeah. I used
That's
to
a,
do a thing on the Back to the Sugar Camp show called Stompin Tom Time.
I was
It was a
actually going
one
to ask you
hour.
to do it. I was going to ask you to do it. I don't have the echo effect here,
Yeah, I don't have the echo on this either. So
but
it's Stompin Tom time. I would
yes.
announce it with a big echo, reverb on my voice. And Tom loved that. He said the first time that he heard it, he had shivers down his spine.
I mean, I enjoyed I did get a request on your show once. You were taking requests, Tom requests. I think it was either on his birthday.
I'm glad you remember that because I totally forgot about that. I used to do Stomp a Tom request show, and of course, Tom's songs. This was live radio, and I had
Yeah,
nobody to help me. I was doing all the production and on-air presence and everything myself, and Tom's songs last 2 to 3 minutes long, and people were phoning me up, and wanting to hear this song and that song, and I'd have to look up which album it's on, queue up the album,
right.
so, oh, it was real hassle. I used to come out of that show the first time I did it. It was just like I can't do this again. One, so I used to get people to help answer the phones for me, and they would take the requests, and that way they would pass along to me, and I created an index of all his songs, which album it's on, which track it is, so I could look it up within like 30 seconds and
Right.
get it on air. You know,
That's a lot
so
of
you were
work.
one of the people that were driving me up the wall there. My own fault. I asked for it and I got it.
Well, you
Part
actually, I remember the one year you did one where you specifically asked for his newer music, stuff that came like after he came out of retirement.
Yeah, I did that once, and I also did a show, the serious side of Stompin' Tom, where I asked people what their second favorite Stompin' Tom song was, and
Right.
I made them tell me what their first one was, but we wouldn't play that. We'd play the second one because I
Okay.
wanted to get, I was doing it every year, and for about 5 or 6 years on his birthday or close to the birthday, and it was getting repetitive.
Yeah.
People wanted Big Joe Mufferaw, Bud the Spud, and,
Right.
Every Saturday Night. And I wanted to play other songs by him as well on this thing. And also, because I used to, when I did those one song a show at Stompin' Tom time, I would always play something that was not very well known by Tom,
Right.
like the Wilf Carter story or,
Hmm.
you know, Old Atlantic Shore, stuff like that. I wanted to get those great songs on there because like there's so much more. But of course, people only know the big hits, right? Mostly.
Yeah, because I remember I asked you to play the Confederation Bridge song.
Well, there you go.
I
Smart
thought
move.
I thought it was a smart move because, well, I mean, I live in Prince Edward Island now, but I lived in Ontario at the time. I lived most of my life in Ontario, and with family roots here, I thought, what other song am I going to ask for?
Well, he had 250 songs before he recorded his last couple of albums
Right.
that were in that songbook of his, 250 Stompin' Tom songs, and there were just so many of them, and
Yeah.
most people didn't know very many, oh, maybe a handful of Stompin' Tom songs, right?
Like and I've interviewed, I don't know if you've seen, I've interviewed several members of his band over the years. That's how I kind of got started with this. I had had a I'd met Whiskey Jack first, and I've talked to them a few times. And then I got an interview with his longtime fiddle player, Billy McInnes, who's been an absolute joy to be in touch with over the years.
Billy's
He's
great.
he's turned into a real friend now.
Oh, Billy's a
Um,
great guy.
and I've talked to quite a few members of his band over the years, and I always ask them, other than the hits, what are your favorite songs of his? Like, what are some that are not so well known? And I guess I'd ask you the same question. What are some of the not so well ones that you're fond of?
The one that I'm most fond of, because I have a guitar and I can pull it out and play the song. And Tom said, "Fruitman, you're the only guy I know that plays that goddamn song." Well, he probably said it with an F word in it, actually.
Yeah.
But he loved that, and I was. It's called "May the Millwright's Daughter"
Okay.
in the little town of Ansonville, not very far from the paper mill. There's a
Right.
girl that I really love. May the Millwright's Daughter, the girl I'm dreaming of. That type of thing, right? And I loved it because it was near Timmins. It was Iroquois Falls sort of absorbed Ansonville. Ansonville was the company town for the pulp and paper mill in Iroquois Falls.
Right.
So it got amalgamated into Iroquois Falls, and the name disappeared from the map. And Tom was still singing it. The other one that I must mention, I actually had a hand in him re-recording it.
Hmm.
What was it called? My mind just slipped out of gear here, but it was on the back of Luke's guitar on CKGB Records.
Okay. Oh, I don't have those records. I wish I did.
Um, can we pause this and I can find the song?
Sure, if you want to. I won't pause it, but yeah, go ahead. If you have it nearby, sure, why not?
Okay. So you can still talk to me while I'm looking for the song, okay?
Sure can, yeah. So do you have those singles still? The the CKGB singles?
Never owned one. Never owned one. I have a guy that used to send me them,
Hmm.
and just trying to find. I'm looking through all my Stompin Tom records here, and I got a lot of them. I should have took the phone with me. Ah, here. Ah,
You found it. Good
found it.
stuff.
Found it. It's on here.
Okay.
Do you think you know which song it is?
Is it the one about the mine?
The Birth of the Texas Gulf Mine.
Okay, because that was a different title at some one time, wasn't it?
Exactly. It was called The Birth of the New Dragon Mine.
Okay.
And it was on the flip side of the single and Luke's guitar. And in Timmins, that great northern place of renown, the Hollinger mine was about to close down. And it was only ever recorded on the back of that 45. And I
Right.
always remembered it. And Charlie Angus had that 45. And before I had Stompin' Tom on my show doing the Stevedore Steve one, I did a tribute to Tom. And I'll tell you that story later because that's a really cool story. Remember to ask me. But Charlie brought the 45 down and we played it, The Birth of the New Dragon Mine. And that
Right.
was the first time I had heard it since the mid 60s.
Wow.
So I always got on Tom's case. You should record that song. Oh, they changed the name of the goddamn mine. It doesn't rhyme anymore. It's the Texas Gulf Mine. How do use that? Before they called it the New Dragon Mine.
Right.
And so he stopped singing the song, and it's a great song. So I just kept on at him. I said, Tom, you got to record that song. He says, Fruitman, you'll be the first to know if I record it. So he recorded it on this album here.
That's a great record too.
Yeah, it's a fabulous record. I'm on that record, actually.
Oh,
I don't
right.
know if you can see right there. My name is.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I have the CD. I
Okay.
don't.
So I played the jug on the Doot song.
Oh, amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah. He wanted a jug blower. They didn't record me very well, I must say. Like they had a hard time mixing my jug with Tim Hadley's bass.
Okay.
So, and I was a little bit disappointed but my name's on the record anyway. But the jug should be loud and right in the front there.
I should mention our
So,
fan club got our mention on his last record.
oh, cool.
The songs from the vault, the Let's Smile
Yeah,
Again. If you look at
yeah,
the back, our Facebook fan club got mentioned, which is quite an
excellent.
honor to
I'd say.
to be mentioned, you know, to have that kind of connection with one of my heroes, you know. But yeah, one of my favorites of the newer songs, I've always liked the song he did called If a Memory Was a Melody.
Ah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Like it's just a beautiful song and it's a totally different side of him that a lot of people don't explore.
Exactly. And this is what I tried to do on my program every week when I had Stompin Tom time. It was play one of those great songs that people just don't get to hear.
Like one of my favorites, when you used to pull out songs from the old time favorites that he did, the two
Yeah.
box sets that he did, and I always loved his version of Wildwood Flower.
Oh yeah. There were so many great songs. You know, I knew nothing about country music other than I love Stompin Tom. And when I first bought the 60 old time favorites in 1970, I bought that six LP box set. It was five LP box set,
Hmm.
60 old time favorites, and I bought it. And I was doing a little radio show, closed circuit radio, out of my high school, Radio Thornlea, we called it.
Right.
And I asked Tom if I can interview him, and interviewed him in the Horseshoe Hotel here in Toronto.
Okay.
They used to have a little restaurant attached to the Horseshoe. Now I think it's a furniture shop or something. But he said, "Come down to the shop at 2 o'clock when I have my breakfast, and I'll give you an interview." So I did that, and that was the first time I really interviewed him. That was probably around 1971 or 72.
Which gets to the next thing I want to talk about. I don't know if you've seen my channel, but I was in Ontario a little while ago and I went and I got a little free hand to walk around the horseshoe and I did a little shoot there. And then I'm really blown away by the mural they have up at the front of Gord, Downey, and Stompin' Tom up by the stage. Um, now, I understand you spent some time in the horseshoe back in the day when Tom would have been playing there.
Well, you know, it was a funny thing that after 1965, Tom left Timmins
Hmm.
and he went touring, and I lost contact with him. You know, like I came up to Timmins in 1966, and he was gone, and nobody knew where he was. Okay, fine. Didn't think of twice about it. And around 1969, there used to be a TV show that was hosted by Vic Mullen on the CBC, and it was aired
Hmm.
right after. Well, they used to have the Juliet show right after the hockey game, right? And when they replaced the Juliet show, they replaced it with this show called Country Time. I turned it on one day, and there was Tom doing twang, twang, diddle dang, you know,
Yeah,
because the show was based out of Halifax. And of course, that's all about a guy in Halifax, down and
right.
out, his wife selling everything. So that's that guy from Timmins, you know, and I was really excited. And I think it was in grade 12, maybe 11 or 12. The drinking age in Ontario at the time was 21.
Okay.
And this guy at school said, a bunch of us guys used to hang around together, of course, and said, "There's this guy named Stompin' Tom Connors. He sings all these Canadian songs. We got to go see him at the Horseshoe." So we all somehow got fake IDs and everything, and it was pretty obvious that
Yeah.
we were all underage, you know. And we got to the Horseshoe really early, like 7:30 or something like that, and he didn't start playing until about 9. And we got seats in the front row. The stage was in a different place than it was at the side.
Yeah.
So we sat in the front row and ordered a beer each. We had a big bouncer who was a wrestler. He used to wrestle at Maple Leaf Gardens, you know. He was the bouncer there, and he had his eye on us right from the start. And we saw Tom play the first set, and this guy Aaron Moses, who was with us, he brought a pack of little cigars, cigarillos or something like that. And he passed them around. We're all sitting there drinking beer, smoking these little cigars, hooting and hollering for Tom, you know. And after the first set, the bouncer came by and said, "Boys, I think you guys have had enough. So I'm going to ask you to leave nicely." And so we cleared out. But I think the Carlton Show Band guys were sitting right behind us too,
Right.
because Tom's bass player was, I think, twin brother of one of the not the bass player, his lead guitar player. Who was it again?
Bill
Not Gary
Lewis.
Anthony, Bill Lewis.
Right.
His brother was in the Carlton Show Band. He was the bass player.
Okay.
And so the whole Carlton Show Band was sitting around us. And I used to be a big fan of the Pig and Whistle show. I loved that show
Right.
on TV. It was just great. The Carlton Show Band were on every week. So for me, meeting the Carlton Show Band was a big thing. And Stompin Tom, seeing them live performing. Anyways, I think we had 2 beers each and we were out in the street. But I was there the next night by myself, actually. And I just behaved. The
Right.
bouncer, I did, I think I had 1 beer and that was it. And the bouncer didn't even check my ID, just, said, just take it easy tonight and everything will be fine and everything. And he never bothered me. And that was the night that I bought the Bud the Spud album.
Mhm.
Uh, Hold on here. This you got to see. I bought, well, this is the wrong one. I got more than one version of the album, of course. I'm just looking for my,
Well,
oh,
my
here it
first
is.
my first copy of that was on 8 track.
Okay, well, mine's on record. I bought it right at the Horseshoe from Tom.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing. That's the original release on Dominion, eh?
Dominion, yeah. And I don't know how it's showing up, but right here are his boot marks.
Oh, he stomped on it for you.
Yeah, but I took the record out first.
Oh, good move.
I saw him do it for somebody else. So, and it's written right here. My nickname was Bird at the time, but you
Right.
can see he autographed it for me.
Oh, that's amazing.
To Bird with luck. And so, yeah, I bought it May 20th, 1971 at the Horseshoe.
Oh, that's an amazing piece to still own.
Yeah. So,
Um, well, I guess the
you
thing
know,
I've always tried to figure out is I was always obsessed with the movie Across This Land.
yeah, that's where it was recorded.
Yeah, and was it a different setup for the movie than it usually was when he played there, or was it
No,
exactly the same?
exactly the same.
Okay, so it was the same stage and all that stuff that was
They
in the
didn't
movie.
change the stage until they remodeled the Horseshoe and sold off that restaurant part.
Right.
And that was probably around the late 70s when it was sold from the Star family to
Yeah.
a couple of different owners, actually, before it stabilized again. And in fact, they changed the name of the hotel for 2 years. It was called something else. I don't even know what it was. It didn't matter.
I'll have to
And
check out my
then it
book.
became a punk rock place.
Yeah. But I mean, do you you've been in there recently, I guess
Oh
you've
yeah, yeah. I,
so what would be the big, like, it's obviously changed a lot since when Tom used to play there or when the movie was shot. Where would the stage have been for the movie? You said off to the side
is when you walk up those 2 or 3 steps from
to
the bar
get into the back. Yeah.
to get into the back where the music was played,
Yeah.
it was right on the left hand side,
Okay.
and there were stairs going down to the dressing room, right, and that was right behind the stage.
Oh, where the bathroom was? Where the
Yeah,
bathrooms are now? Okay.
yeah. Well, the bathrooms is in the same place. In fact,
Okay.
they look just the same. They haven't changed. But
So
the
that
dressing
that
room was down there as well.
okay. So and then I was told that the live band area was like twice the size of what it is now.
No, no, it was exactly the same. It
Oh,
was just
really?
that it was just that it was on the side instead of at the back. But
Okay.
it was a very small stage. Like, it was a stage you can fit a drum kit on and maybe 2 or 3 people, and that was it. There was, you know, and the people sat close to the stage. They had more seating at the back, but nobody sat back there.
Right.
It was because you couldn't really see.
Okay.
But
Because
it wasn't a great, like, what they did was good. Making a big stage at the back, that was good, because like most of the acts that came there, before they changed it, would play at that old stage that Tom used because they were small bands. But
Yeah.
eventually the Horseshoe got big bands, 10-piece bands in there and stuff like that. So they needed a big stage. Plus, they needed a more powerful sound system. And they used to, with the country western people, they just had a small sound system.
And they were the place for country music back then.
There were two places in Toronto, and that was one of them. The Edwin Hotel was the other one. So, or the Drake Hotel, the Drake. I think there's a couple of albums recorded at the Drake, old country western albums. But the Drake and the Horseshoe were the two country western bars in Toronto. Yeah.
Because my dad used to hang out there when he first come up from PEI to Toronto. Um, and it's funny, after reading both books, my dad said he remembers all the places he hung out in Mimico more than he did in PEI, which I found funny. And dad said, I wouldn't be surprised if I ran into him somewhere down there, because every one of those beer joints he talked about down on the lakeshore in Mimico, he goes, I've been in those. So it's kind of interesting to hear the story. But yeah, thanks for answering those questions about the horseshoe, because I was always curious to know what the setup was like back then for the when they shot that movie there, because that
Well, the
movie's
movie the movie was exactly the same as the way the Horseshoe was when the country western crowd was coming in.
yeah, what a
Looked
it,
exactly like that.
it's a great snapshot of Toronto back then, isn't it?
Hmm.
Like it really is. The stubby beer bottles on the tables and people smoking, and
Well,
it's
there aren't very many movies like that. Like there was Going Down the Road
yeah,
by Don Shabib. That was a fabulous movie. People can still see it on YouTube. I watched it about a year ago actually, and it's a great movie. It has some Bruce Coburn in it and some Stompin Tom. I think they showed the stamp out Stompin Tom billboard or something in
yeah.
that
They made a
movie.
sequel. Did you see the sequel?
I saw the sequel. Yeah, one of the guys was apparently dead, and
Yeah,
yeah, I saw the sequel too. They were really timepieces that you saw the Stubby beer bottles and the Wilson's Ginger Ale Company and
right. There was
old
no
Toronto because there's not that much film feature of Toronto in those days.
it's true.
Yeah,
Um, and another thing I've been kind of curious to lately, maybe you know something about this, but I remember as a kid going to the Ontario Place Cinesphere on a school trip and seeing a movie, and Tom was in it.
Tom sang Algoma Central '69 in that movie. It was a
Yes.
movie about Northern Ontario.
Yeah.
What was it called?
I think it was called Catch the Sun
No,
or something like that.
well, it'll
Because
come to me, but
because they made mention of it on the Big Joe Mufferaw record.
it was the first IMAX film
Yeah.
ever, and it was developed by a guy up in Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Yeah.
And it was developed with 9 cameras to shoot that big wall of screen in the Cinesphere at Ontario Place, and with a big sound system. North of Superior, it was called.
Okay.
North of Superior, and I think Tom they were showing us skiing, somebody skiing down a mountain or something like that, and Tom was singing Algoma, I believe,
Right.
in
And
that
I've always
film.
wondered what happened to that movie. Like I'd love to see that clip again. It'd be really
I
something.
saw it on YouTube.
Oh, really? I can't find it. I don't know why.
Yeah,
But it'd be something to get re-released or something like that. And some of the
sure.
I'm sure
Not
there's
quite the
some
same as seeing it in the Cinesphere, though.
no, it's not, but it really is a piece of his history, like stuff to I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in the vault still to come out, possibly.
Possibly.
Possibly. I'd like to see that, but who knows? I don't know who's in charge of his music anymore. I think is it still Anthem Records?
Yeah, yeah. They pretty much bought the publishing rights.
Okay. So they're still in charge of releasing anything that comes out.
Yeah, because it's got to go through them. The family couldn't really deal with the business side of things, and
Yeah.
it's very complicated stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, Tom was a stickler for his rights because he got totally screwed by his first record company,
Yeah.
Rebel Records, that put out the first 2 albums and a couple of 45s, and he never saw a cent. And he signed over all of his publishing rights without realizing what he was doing. This was like 1966, 67.
Right.
and he wasn't even called Stompin Tom Connors until the 1st of July '67.
Hmm.
He officially became Stompin Tom. But so the first two albums released were just by Tom Connors, not Stompin Tom, on
Yeah.
Rebel, and the owner of the thought, oh, it should have bass on it, so he played bass on it, and he didn't know how to play bass. The bass goes all over the place, out of tune and everything, and so when Tom switched over to Dominion Records, he wanted to re-release the stuff.
Right.
Realized he didn't own the publishing to it,
Right.
and he paid. I think it's in one of his in Before the Fame, the book. I think he mentions that he had to pay about $3,000 in those days to get the publishing rights back to his songs.
Wow. Imagine what you have to pay now.
Yeah, John Irvine owned the company at that time. He did a lot of nefarious work with by ripping up artists. McKendall Middleton Mainline, their first album was a bootleg, the first Canadian bootleg that this guy put out. And the band were just so upset about it. They anyway. Tom had to pay all this money out. He borrowed money because he didn't have any money. He borrowed money from all of his friends to
Right.
buy back his rights. So he was a stickler. That's why he didn't want to. He wanted his own record company, his own publishing companies,
Hmm.
his own artist management. He was the first do it yourself artist in Canada that way that was successful.
It's true. He was a real
Indie
he,
artist.
he's a trailblazer when it comes to that
Yeah,
kind of stuff. Like, I mean, it's so known now. Everybody does it on their own nowadays because of the technology. It's so easy to do it. But he was the first to really do it, even in Timmins when he was selling records out of his car.
yeah.
Like it was unheard of back then especially in the Canadian music industry. Like, because it,
Well, there were, in those days. Actually, I hate to contradict you, but I will.
oh,
um, Artists were always encouraged to sell their product from the stage back then when they were playing the hotel circuits.
right,
The Northern Bar circuit was notorious for a lot of reasons. Um, a lot of artists lost a tooth or so in there. They were singing into the mic and a fight starts and somebody bashes the mic by mistake into the guy's mouth. I mean, that was normal in those days. So it's amazing Tom had all of his teeth. But no, Mac Beatty was selling records from the stage. They were because they they couldn't get the records in the stores.
right,
You see, they weren't getting any airplay on Canadian radio.
yeah,
None of them were. And all these albums are. I got a list of albums there. Canadian country. There's probably about 700 records there, and they were probably mostly sold from the stage. Like Sam the Record Man might take half a dozen on
right,
consignment. So if it didn't sell, you wrote records.
yeah,
Um, and that's the biggest record store in the country at that time.
right,
Um, there was Fred Rodin's Record Corral here in Toronto. It specialized in country music, but the Canadian section was just a really small,
right,
because the records didn't sell, because nobody knew who they were. So the only times that they really had an audience captured to buy their records was in live performance, and they would sell them beside the stage during their breaks.
oh,
You
right.
know that, and they were charged an arm and a leg for their own records. The record company would mark it down against their royalties.
Ah, man, you just couldn't catch a fair break back then either, could you?
Well, the music industry has always been the most corrupt industry in the world for
It's
ripping off people, and it doesn't matter which country you're in. Unless you're the Beatles or Shania Twain or somebody like that, you get ripped off. They all got ripped off.
yeah,
There's nefarious accounting methods. This is why what Stevedore Steve and a lot of artists around 1975, when the Canadian tax laws changed, they realized that uh, they you may have sold a lot of records and everything, but it went against your royalties, and
right,
but on your taxes it looked like you made all this money,
right,
and unless you knew how to write it off, you were liable. So a lot of them got these tax bills worth 10, $12,000, and they couldn't pay them, so they retired. So this happened like the stevedore Steve retired in 1975 or 76. He just packed it up. The tax department came and they towed his van away with all his records and even his guitar. They took everything, and this was happening all over the country. And it was bad. It was really, really bad. And I know like fiddle players from the Maritimes stopped recording because they
Right.
didn't want to owe money. You
Wow.
know,
It's kind of sad because it probably held a lot of artists back that, deserve better than that.
well, I sat up all night with Tom and Matheson and the Bon Air. No, not Matheson. He was playing Matheson, but he was staying in Timmins at the Bon Air Motel, 1993. That's when Whiskey Jack was backing him up on that tour with Graham Townsend. And I stayed up all night with Tom, and we were playing songs. And I played him a Mac Beatty song, "Little Shack Up the Pontiac."
Yeah.
Pontiac's a region in Quebec, right
Hmm.
near Ottawa. And when I finished that song, Tom was just sitting there like this. Why can't you hear these songs on the radio?
Yeah.
He said, that was a fantastic song. He says, it's Canadian as hell. And he said, I've never heard it before. I said,
Yeah.
Tom, Mac Beatty had 11 albums of songs like that. It was one thing to record these albums, but it was another thing to make any money off. The only people making the money were the record companies.
Yeah. It's sad. Um, I get
It hasn't changed much.
no, it's probably even worse now because record sales aren't really a factor anymore, are they? Like, I mean, vinyl's pretty popular these days, but I don't think they're selling millions like they used to.
No, the streaming companies are paying, pennies for a million downloads, stuff like that. It's ridiculous. I don't
Like,
know how artists make money anymore.
do they even make money touring anymore? I've heard that's not even a viable way to make money anymore.
Well, in Tom's day, touring meant that you left town on a Monday for another town, and you started playing Tuesday night, and you ended on Saturday night after doing a Saturday matinee, and Sunday was a day off, and then off you went to another place. But you were working all week
Yeah.
in one place. Nowadays, touring is totally different. You have to go to a different place every night, and the costs of going 8 hours to the next town in Canada are prohibitive to many
Yeah.
people. How do you make any money when you're doing that? Paying your musicians and your manager and your booking agent and
Hotels,
hotels
places
and
to stay.
food
Yeah.
and everything. It's like, Tom was able to do that in his last, when he came back from retirement, because he was a big star. He had a big name. I mean, if Tom was going, he wasn't playing the Horseshoe and JR's bar in Charlottetown anymore. He was
Right.
playing the concert halls, and hockey arenas.
Yeah. Did you ever get down to PEI with Tom?
Not with Tom, no, no. I have a funny story though, if you want to hear it.
Oh, of course. That's what this is all about.
This is unreal. Okay, when I think about it today, it's like what? Okay, so this is what happened. A friend of mine, who I used to work with at the post office. I used to work at the post office.
Hmm.
We were going up to his cottage one Friday afternoon after work. He was up in Magnetawan, Ontario, and we'd go up there and have a few beers, and he said I'd love to see some of the pictures of PEI, that you took and stuff like that. And so I brought up a photo album, and I loaded up the car, and I picked Carrie up, and we went up to Magnetawan, and he says, "Where's the album?" I said, I'm sure it's in the car somewhere. I put it on the roof and I left it there.
No.
Right. Well, but I never told my wife I lost the picture album because There was pictures of the kids and everything, and uh, I went to play on that album. This
Oh,
one,
okay.
2008, I believe that was right, and I think that's when it was. And Tom brought me into the studio. Brian Edward, not Brian Edwards, Brian Hewson, I think,
Hmm.
was producing him in Bolton.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, up in Halton Hills.
Yeah, Escarpment Sound.
Okay, yeah.
So that's where I went to record the jug. So Tom says, come up then on such and such a date, and we'll record you. And okay, fine. So I go up there and I walk in, and he and Lena are sitting in the control booth with Brian, and they're smiling at me. And I said, something's up, you know. I said, what? Take a look at this photo album and see if you recognize anything. That's my photo album.
You've got
I
to
said,
be
where did you
kidding.
get this from? There was a note inside. This guy found it not far from where I live. So it flew off the roof of the car and he put it in a telephone booth. And it
That's
sat in the telephone booth for who knows how long. And someone saw it there and said he found this in the telephone booth at the corner of Danforth and Logan. And he looked through it, and the only person he recognized was Stompin Tom. There were pictures of me with in front of his schoolhouse on PEI.
right.
When he used to have the boot, his old truck up there,
Yeah.
and it was on blocks, I think, at the back of the schoolhouse. And he said, well, the only thing I could think of doing is sending it to Stompin' Tom. So he looked on one of the back of one of Tom's album covers, box 129 in Georgetown, and he sent it there. And
Wow.
they were handing it back to me. So what are the chances of that ever happening? I mean, come
That,
on.
that's amazing.
So that's a Stompin' Tom story you'll never hear from anybody else.
Oh, that's a fantastic story. That's great that it wound up in his hands.
Yeah, and I still have the photo album to this day, right?
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great
That,
story.
so I came back and I told my wife about it.
Geez, you could write a book about your time to Stop and Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've obviously had a big um connection with Stomp and Tom over the years. Are there any other Canadian artists you've had some contact with? I mean, obviously the Grievous Angels, they're great guys and you know them really well, but have you been like had a good uh rapport with other artists as well through your
Oh, yeah.
show?
Oh, hundreds and hundreds. I've I- interviewed, like I say, like the Great North Wind Show was all Canadian, and even Back to the Sugar Camp was almost all Canadian, except in fact, I got more Canadian with Back to the Sugar Camp. And so Canadian singer songwriters, Celtic musicians, country and Western artists, especially Newfoundlanders.
Hmm.
I had tons of them on my show, just tons of them.
I really enjoyed a show you did on your new inclination of the show, 33, 45, 78. I really enjoyed you did a show, I think it was two shows, maybe even three, about all the bands you've seen live.
Yeah, yeah,
I was just hung on every song you played because it was just amazing the eclectic group of artists you have seen live over the years.
yeah. That somebody mentioned to me, you should do that for a show. I said, okay. I didn't realize, wow, where that would take me. But yeah, that was a lot of fun putting that together.
So you've
Yeah, because I
obviously,
saw the Beatles two times, right?
oh, that's
So
amazing. Do you
64
save
and
your do you
65.
save your ticket stubs?
Yes, but I lost them.
Oh,
Our
because
family
I've
moved in 1972. My parents decided to sell the house and move somewhere, and I don't know what happened to a lot of my stuff. My records
yeah,
were fine. I had all my records, but things like ticket stubs went missing. So I don't
because
know what happened to them. I
I've
had all the
always I've
stubs.
always gotten on my mom's case because she saw Elvis at Maple Leaf Gardens in the 50s. And I always told her, do you know what that ticket stub might be worth today?
Yeah, I know that the Beatles ones were 550 for the tickets.
Right? because I
five
save
dollars
every
and 50 cents to see the Beatles.
because of my mom, I save every ticket stub I've ever been to a show.
Good,
So,
good.
and it seems kind of dumb, but it's because of my mom. I saved my ticket stubs. So I've
Yeah.
got Rush's last show at the Gardens. If
Oh, cool.
that might be worth something one day. The last
Yeah.
time they ever played Maple Leaf Gardens. So, um, but I guess I've seen Facebook groups where people post their ticket stubs, and it's just amazing some of the stuff you see.
Yeah.
Like especially some guys just have nothing but Maple Leaf Gardens ticket stubs, and you just don't realize all the events that have happened there that are just incredible.
Oh, I
You
saw
know,
so many bands there. It was great. I mean, it was wonderful.
yeah, I have a lot of my memories are mostly from Exhibition Stadium,
Hmm.
the old Exhibition Stadium, seeing so many shows there, seeing Peter Gabriel on a Saturday night, and the next night seeing Bon Jovi, and you
Yeah,
know,
I saw Tina Turner there. You know, she did a
yeah,
fantastic show there. She just died.
yeah, everybody played there back in, I remember the summers
Oh yeah.
where the X, the grandstand. I remember when after a Blue Jay game, they used to tow that stage out
So
in
do you
front of the.
remember what happened with Stompin Tom?
I do. Wasn't very good. Wasn't a very pleasant experience.
No, they paired him
Um,
up with Charlie Pride, and they paid Charlie Pride 10 times what they paid Tom, and that's what
yeah,
started his riff with the CNE.
but I kind of agree with that. Like, you know, Tom should have been the headliner.
Well,
You know,
Charlie Pride, come on, Charlie Pride was a megastar, and but Tom should have been paid the similar amount of money because he had just as
yeah,
many fans there as Charlie Pride did.
yeah,
And I don't want to take anything away from Charlie Pride, but you know, it was unfair, and it just
yeah,
showed the bias in the Canadian music business. Yeah, we can get Stompin' Tom for $2,000 and give Charlie Pride 20,000. That sounds reasonable. They're
yeah.
both
Like
playing the same length of time,
it just seems like a lack of respect for your own homegrown talent.
but that's the way it was, and that's why Tom went to war against them. I
Yeah,
mean, his first ACT album, Assist Canadian Talent, where he sang 4 songs and he recorded a whole bunch of his friends, it came with a big rant in the inner sleeve of the record against the Canadian establishment because of the way they treated the Canadian music artists.
yeah. Especially the ones like he said chose to
Yeah,
stay here in Canada, which is not an easy thing to do.
and he wrote songs about it, and yeah,
Um,
it was a real thing with him. That was the thing that bothered him the most, I think.
he really stuck his neck out on the line for that, didn't he?
Well, he wasn't very well liked in the Canadian music business, in the industry,
Yeah,
and because of what he would say, and he made a lot of enemies. But then he went into retirement for 12 years, and when he came back with the show, he was on the Katie Lang special,
I remember that. Yeah,
and the country went nuts. It wasn't just the old fans that went nuts; it was young punks that went nuts too.
yeah. It was amazing how popular he was with the college and university crowd too.
Man, I saw this band called Weddings, Parties, Anything from Australia. They were one of the sort of a Pogues type band doing folk
Right,
music, rock and roll style.
right.
And they came to Canada. They were in Halifax for about a month, and they came to Toronto for a few months just to make it worth their while. And they were doing Bud the Spud. They were doing Sudbury Saturday Night. They said, "Here's some great songs you Canadians should know." And they thought these were amazing songs. So, and there was all these Rio Statics and the Grievous Angels, and there was all these punk bands, Corn Dogs, and positively stomping, and they were all doing Stompin' Tom songs in their sets, and the audiences were going nuts.
I remember buying a compilation CD of a bunch of punk bands doing Stompin' Tom songs. I think it was called Stomp on Wood.
Yeah, they were Alberta artists.
Yeah, that was incredible. Like it's
A
just
friend of
it's
mine, Al Bakelin, used to do a show at CIT. He did a song. Forget the name. I can't remember which song he did, but he was on there. There were some great punk versions of some of those songs.
It's incredible. It's incredible to hear. And I'm always amazed. Like I've interviewed Brian Edwards a couple of times, and I've always been amazed to know how far Tom's music has gotten outside of Canada. But I never realized how well known he was among the music industry, even in the States. Like I've
Yeah,
heard Dave Grohl is a huge fan of Stompin' Tom.
oh, is that so? Eh?
Um, he told me Brian Edwards said whenever he went down to Nashville, little Jimmy Dickens always asked him, "How's Stompin' Tom doing?" And I wouldn't even think any of those guys even knew who he was, but apparently Marty Stewart's a big fan.
Yeah.
You know, when
Well,
I hear
it's
stuff like
amazing
that,
how far it goes, eh?
yeah, like it's just amazing. I'm always amazed when I hear stuff like that. Apparently, Les Claypool is a big Stompin' Tom fan. Apparently, he
So
was in
can I
a.
tell you how I got Stompin' Tom on my show the first time?
I would love to hear that. Yeah,
Okay, so this I was just starting out in radio. I was in my first year, and around Christmas time, a little before Christmas time, 1988, I asked Charlie Angus because I became friends with the Grievous Angels.
yeah,
That's where I first met Tim Hadley, and I started playing in an alternate band with three other Grievous Angels called the Cajun Ramblers. What we were called, did Cajun and Zydeco music.
right.
So we were sort of like one big family of musicians. And Chuck had the Birth of the New Dragon Mine 45. I said
Hmm.
you should come on the show and we should play it. He said I don't even know if it plays because he hadn't played it in years. It was his grandfather's record, I think,
Yeah,
that his grandfather bought in Timmins. So I said, well, we should do a Stomp a Tom show, show the different aspects of Tom because you're from a different generation than I am. We're both from Timmins. We have
right.
different takes on it, but it would be really interesting to do a show together. So he came down and we did a show. And beforehand, I had phoned Tom's management, which I saw on the back of a record, and I said, I'm doing this show on Stompin' Tom. Maybe you might like to listen to it. I don't know if he would or not, but anyways, this is when it's airing. This is what we're doing. So we did the show, and I was gonna. After the show, I had to drive Charlie back home, and apparently Tom called up the station to wanted to speak to us. Telling us a good job and everything. And I didn't find out that that happened until the next day when the station manager phoned me and said, that Stompin' Tom called here last night after you left.
Wow.
So we missed him. So I wanted to do a show on Stevedore Steve, and I don't know how familiar your fans are about no Stevedore Steve.
Well, if they're Stompin' Tom fans, they know who Steve or Steve is.
Okay, let's hope so. And anyway, I wanted to do a show on the Stevedore, and I wanted to get maybe a little note from Tom, anything, just recognizing who the guy was and everything that I can read over the air. So I hooked up with Tom's management, who was just a guy, just a bloke, and he, where was it going with it? I can't think. I had a little message from my wife there.
Okay.
um, so anyway, I'm on the phone with this guy. I think he's one of the guys that's on that Act album too.
Right.
But he lived down the road from Tom, the same road, and he real gatekeeper. This guy, you're not getting by me. Tom doesn't give interviews. Tom doesn't do this, doesn't do that. Tom doesn't. I
Yeah.
said, look I'm not asking for the moon here. Just tell him that I want to do this tribute to Steve Dorsey. He said, who's that? I said, you don't know who Stevedore Steve is? He didn't know. I said, well, if Tom finds out that you don't know who Stevedore Steve is, you can look for another job, buddy. So he says, well, he's going to say no. And I said, just ask him. And at that time, Tom had only given one interview. in his coming back from his 12 years of
Oh, was that
being,
Peter Zosky?
yeah.
Okay.
And that was not a good experience for Tom.
No.
Tom was very bitter about that interview. And I won't go into why. That's Tom's business. But so he wasn't necessarily up for doing this after that taste.
Right.
Like everything's the same as it was before I left the industry, 12 years ago, right? So anyway, he gets this request, and this guy's doing the show on Steve Steve and wants to know if he'll do something. And I get a call back the next day from the guy. He says, "Yeah, Tom will do a telephone interview with you."
Wow.
I never asked for a telephone interview, live on air.
Yeah.
I just was hoping that he would provide me with a few words, or a story or something
Yeah.
that I can read over the air, right? But it's only got to be 5 minutes, maximum 5 minutes. I said, I'll do it. Don't worry about it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And they said, give me the station's phone number. They didn't want to get Tom's number to me. So Tom would call the station. I said, tell him to call it 20 after the hour, and I'll patch him through, and we'll do the thing about Steve. So he called up at the appropriate time, and it was like 5 minutes goes by, and I said, well, if I can just tell you another little story, Steve, and this went on for 20 minutes. I heard all about the pies, stealing the pies, and when they were hoboing with Lucky Jim,
Hmm.
Steve and Tom, the pool room antics, the box cars. He told all the stories. Well, not all of them, as much as I could fit into 20 minutes anyway.
Right. That
So
must
that
have
was
been
the
a
first
very,
time.
that must have been a real exciting time for you for being so early into your radio show.
Well, all these a-holes out there were telling me, you're barking up the wrong tree. He'll never do it. You'll never get Stompin' Tom. He won't do it. Everybody's been asking for Stompin' Tom. He doesn't do that. It was all this negative crap.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, just watch me. And I did it.
And you've done several since then. Since then, it's
The big thing with Tom is trust. He was a big guy for loyalty.
hmm.
And if you crossed him, watch out.
Yeah.
But if you were a loyal and a true person, and I'm not talking about being, yes, Tom, no, Tom, I'll do whatever you say, Tom. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being your own person, but someone he can trust.
Yeah.
You're not going to do some surreptitious little thing around his back type of thing, you know. Um, he was used to. He always looked like, when we first saw you, like, he check you out. Who is this guy, right?
Yeah.
He was very wise that way. He was very he could tell people's personalities just by glimpsing at them.
I took
And
that from him that he could really read people
he could
because
read people. He
because
was a
he's
street person, right?
but he could fit in with anybody. He could fit in
Yeah,
with a bum on the street. He could fit in with the queen. Like it's just amazing that he thought of everybody the same.
yeah. So, but he could tell right away a person, and he liked me right away. When I asked him again for another interview, he said, "Don't go through that guy. You give me a call." And he gave me the phone number, and
Uh,
I would just call him up. So anytime he had a new album out, I'd call him up. Want to do an interview, Tom? Yep, I'd like to do it. Yeah. So and I did one show with him about his favorite country artists, and I had him pick out the songs
right.
and talk about them. People talk about Tom, but I don't know if the other guests told you, when you sit around his bar at his home jamming with him, he'd pick out a song. He knew 2,500 songs by heart. None of his own songs. He never. Maybe he might sing one or two of his own songs sitting around the bar,
Right.
but that wasn't Tom Connors. That was Stompin' Tom. And there was a big difference between the two guys. One was a stage guy, one was the real guy. And the real guy loved Wilf Carter and Hank Snow and all those great artists that recorded Hank Thompson and Hank Williams and all the Hanks. And and all the people that he got those 120 country and western songs from on those records that he
Right.
put out. And I brought my friend Eric Wilson. Eric was a retired truck driver in his 80s when I brought him up
Yes.
there.
I remember
Just
hearing him on your show.
Yeah, he's just passed away last year, unfortunately. But I brought him up to Tom's, and Eric was like, he couldn't believe it. Like, I called Tom and said, the guy that does my Wilf Carter? He's my Wilf Carter expert. Can I bring him up to your place? He said, absolutely. So I brought him up, and he treated Eric so well that Eric knows all these old songs. And he'd say to Tom, do you know this song or that song? Oh, hell, I haven't played that song in maybe 35 years. I think it goes like this. And he'd start singing it, and it would just all come right back to him. Like he just knew all these songs,
Yeah.
which was amazing, really.
Could I give you
I,
my take on Tom?
yeah, please.
Um, just the way he was, it seemed to me like he was shunned by the industry because he was doing something nobody else was doing. To me, it seemed like that. It seemed like he found a niche nobody else caught on to, and it worked. And it worked against the system that was in place for making music. He did it his own way. He was doing something nobody else was doing, and he made a success of it in his own way. And it kind of reminds me of a little TV station called City TV. Because
Steve had a show on City TV for 2 years.
there you go. But Moses Znaimer was doing things in TV that was chastised by the industry because I think they were doing something different. They were doing something nobody else was doing and
Like
successful
playing
at it.
baby blue movies on Friday nights.
That too. But I mean, if you watch Much Music back in those days when Much Music played anything, they play the hits of the day, but they play a song by The Pursuit of Happiness. That cheap little video they shot down on Queen Street for I'm an Adult Now, and they put it in heavy rotation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Nobody else was doing that. But that's what it kind of reminds me of. Tom and City TV and Much Music were kind of the same way back then. They were doing things differently that a lot of the industry types didn't like, but they were making a success of it despite that.
Well, the industry wasn't making money off these guys. That's the problem. These
Yeah,
guys found a way to make their own money, and the industry wanted everything to go through them.
yeah,
That's their bread and butter, right? So anybody that's opposite to that is they don't like. That's the way it works, right?
that's the way I've always kind of seen it. Like it just he kind of upset some people because he did it his own way and made a success of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I've always thought about it anyway. And everybody talks about the Tragically Hip. They were great because they wrote Canadian songs, but I think Tom paved the way for guys like that.
Well, I've read books by Stan Rogers and Gord Lightfoot and people like that, and Tom is mentioned in these books a lot of times
Hmm.
as an example of a person in the industry that they respected that did it their own way. Stan Rogers said that Tom inspired him. I don't know if he actually liked Stompin' Tom's music, but it inspired him to write Canadian songs with an identifiably Canadian aspect. It wasn't just that they were a Canadian song, but
Right,
Tom wanted them to be identifiably Canadian.
right.
As you know, he always said that it's okay to sing about Tulsa, Oklahoma, or San Antonio. Anybody been to San Antonio or Phoenix, Arizona, and mention those towns, but you mention North Bay or Winnipeg, and
Yeah.
people think it's hokey. And it was classism. There was a guy that ran the country music store on the Danforth here in Toronto, Ozzy Branscombe,
Hmm.
and he said it was classism, a put down of people that liked a certain type of thing that wasn't considered cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It certainly seems like that. It's just
it's
yeah.
classism, and it's wrong.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I don't know. I guess that's why I respected Tom so much. Well, I mean, the other reason I'm so attached to Tom is because he's from where my dad's from on PEI. Um, my dad is literally 20 minutes, grew up down the road from Skinner's Pond. So
Oh,
there's
really?
there's always been a close connection with Tom over the years because of my family. Um, because when he was the same age as my dad, and when he talked about growing up on Skinner's Pond, my dad grew up the exact same way. You know,
Hmm. It
if
was
you
a
did,
very poor part of the island.
it was a different time. It was a different, when you see pictures of my dad back in those days on the farm, it looks just like the ones Tom had in his book when he was on Skinner's Pond. It was the exact same part of the